burning coal wood or charcoal for cooking kills more people worldwide than malaria.
Welcome to The Human Factor, the show where we explore social change through the eyes of social entrepreneurs. My name is Melanie Roussin, her name is Erin McCabe, and we are your hosts. Erin and I met when working in the non-for-profit sector. We became really curious about social change and the people behind it. So we created the Human Factor podcast. If you're starting or running a social enterprise, or you're simply interested in stories of good or how social change happened, then you're in the right place. Stick around and have a listen.
Not many people realise that cooking with wood is one of the world's leading health problems. Most families in developing countries are forced to cook with wood up to 3 times a day, leading to serious health issues that are on par with smoking. In fact, in countries like Cambodia, cooking with wood kills more people than traffic accidents each year. Today, we talk to Ben Jeffries, CEO of ATEC Biodigesters International, a unique social enterprise that was created by 2 Australian NGOs as a way to tackle this health issue in Cambodia. Backed by Google, ATEC sells and distributes biodigesters that are simple devices that create renewable gas from waste, aiming to bring about, in their own words, a brown revolution. So hi, Ben. Thank you so much for joining us on The Human Factor. Please fill in the gaps in my intro and tell us how you would describe yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Erin, and thanks, Melanie. Thanks for having me on today, and hi to everyone there. Yeah, that was a good intro, thank you. The only bit I would add is probably just a couple of other things to give a bit of an idea of the extent of the issue you mentioned. So if you look at a global level, around 3.5 million people, it's estimated, die from smoke-related illnesses each year. And a majority of that is women as well, which is a very unfortunate thing. It's a huge health problem. More people die from cooking with wood than malaria around the world. So that is a serious issue that needs addressing. And thankfully, there's a range of options out there that are starting to address it. The beauty of bringing in more clean cooking options as well is that it also reduces pressure on forests in many developing countries as well. So there's a real benefit there around forests. So, for example, in Cambodia, around 80% of the wood that's consumed each year is for domestic cooking. So the more and faster we can bring solutions to that, the better it will be for the environment moving forward too. The other interesting point as well that I think I quite often talk about too, so our biodigesters basically convert waste, predominantly animal manure is the main one people use, into biogas, and it creates about 20 tonnes of fertiliser per year as well. So the other one we talk about is there's effectively a large soil crisis going on across the world that not a lot of people are aware of, even less than the cooking issue. So basically, the estimates are if we continue with current practices of high chemical fertilizer use and high deforestation, effectively we're going to run out of topsoil in 60 years with current practices. So that's obviously an issue for farmers, but that's also a huge risk to global food chains as well. So this is a very, very pressing issue that is getting nowhere near the attention that it needs to. So you're starting to see that change. Just at the farmer level, they got this bumper crop the first year they use chemical fertilizers, but then what tends to happen is the crops decline and decline if they don't manage that by also using organic fertilizers in the mix too. And so what happens is they get a declining yield over the years. So farmers are already sort of onto it in many countries, but we globally need to be thinking about that and how we can do that better moving forward.
So as the CEO of a social enterprise that's based in Cambodia, I'm sure that no one day is the same as the next, but if you can, tell us what a typical day looks like for you.
Extremely boring in that it's very sort of standard management stuff in emails, sort of looking at spreadsheets, meetings, phone calls, etc. So the content is not that different from a lot of different jobs, or the activities aren't. I think probably what's the exciting, fascinating stuff is the things you're working on and why you're working on it. So that's sort of the motivation that sort of gets you out of bed in the morning. One sort of opportunity with my work that's I'm quite blessed with is I'm able to do a bit of travel and go see different countries and talk to people, and we've installed units I think in 5 different countries now. So being able to go and see those units in action and see the differences in communities, etc., is pretty exciting.
Before I heard of ATEC, actually I had never heard of biodigester. So you've talked about, the issue of the health issue related to cooking with wood. But if you wouldn't mind explaining in simple terms what biodigesters are and what role they play in terms of reducing some of the health impact caused by cooking with wood.
It's funny, it's a technology that's been around for a long time, but it doesn't have a very high sort of view in the West, which is quite interesting. Biodigesters, if you go way back, the lamps or the street lights in London used to be powered by biogas. So they used to collect all the organic matter together in London and run it into a biodigester. Then they'd run the gas out to power the street lights in London. That's before sort of cheap electricity came along. So it's not a new technology as such. In the developing world, it's much more prevalent because in a lot of these areas there's a very high need for gas and very low distribution of sort of LPG or other clean cooking options as well. So basically, at a very simple level, what you do is you put in organic matter, so typically, say, cow manure, pig manure. You can also put in kitchen waste, green waste, etc. You can also connect a toilet up. And then there's these great little methogenic bacteria that exist naturally in the manure of quite a few animals that effectively break down that waste into methane and then what's called a bioslurry, which is an organic fertilizer. So that you then get those two outputs, and then through pressurizing the system, you can use the gas just like LPG, and then with a good setup, you can store the fertilizer and then use it on the farm from there. So they're a pretty nifty device. The thing I really like about them as well is you get more benefit out of it. It's not a zero-sum game with a biodigester in that, say, a farmer has cow manure. It's not like the cow manure becomes less valuable or less effective through putting it through the biodigester. It actually increases the nutrient value of the manure through the biodigester as the fertilizer, plus you get the gas as well. So that's pretty exciting.
Wow. I'd never really heard of it either, but it's fascinating. So ATEC is quite a unique social enterprise, not just because of cooking with waste, but it's born out of 2 well-established NGOs, Engineers Without Borders and Live and Learn Environmental Education. Can you tell us the story about how ATEC actually came to be?
Yeah, so it started off, actually, it was originally, I think around 2008 or 2009, there was a EWB project looking at how can there be sort of hygiene and sanitation happen on the Tonle Sap Lake. So the Tonle Sap Lake is this big lake in the middle of Cambodia. There's actually people who live in floating villages there, and sanitation was a huge issue. So they were looking at, well, how can we incentivize people to treat their waste? So they saw that there was sort of a shortage of sort of fuels for cooking, obviously, in a floating village. So they thought, well, let's look at a biodigester setup where they get the treatment of the human waste plus then the treatment of or then adding in other waste into the system, and you get some clean cooking out of it. So incentivizing it from there. From there, then Engineers Without Borders and Live and Learn Environmental Education, the 2 NGOs, went through a few different design iterations from there over several years. And basically what came out of that was they saw that there was 2 key issues with biodigesters moving forward. One was that you take a country like Cambodia, a lot of the country experiences seasonal flooding, or 90% of households have high groundwater. In those conditions, a traditional brick biodigester will actually crack very easily. So we needed to look at a different technology that could work in those conditions to reach those last mile customers. The second thing that was seen as well was then The traditional biodigester is usually made on site by hand, taking sort of around 2 working weeks worth of labour. You have real big issues around quality control in those situations. So a lot of biodigesters have been done in some countries very successfully, but in other countries trying to get that quality up to scratch, plus with the high groundwater, which you see in many developing countries, or cyclones or earthquakes, etc. A lot of people were not getting the access or the benefit from biodigesters. So out of those two sort of situations, we saw that there was a big gap in the market, and that what had started off as a sanitation project, actually we designed this biodigester that could be installed in those conditions, as well as be commercially scalable. So Lizzie Brown and Christian Nielsen, the respective leaders of those two organizations, then took that to Google for the Google Impact Challenge, pitched it to Google, and managed to be one of the winners of that, which was great, which is when I came on board. And then we've sort of gone on from there and brought on new partners and did an investment round last year to scale up from there.
Wow, that's amazing. And I've actually was just in December on the lake in Cambodia and saw the floating village, so I can totally understand how much of an impact a biodigester would make to those communities. So as a social enterprise, how does ATEC ensure it's working towards achieving that social mission but still making a profit?
Yeah, that's a good question. That is, I think, anyone who's done something in social enterprise or any sort of business where they're looking at not just profit but the purpose as well. It's a constant tension between the two areas, because there is that challenge of sometimes those two areas align, but sometimes they don't. Now, obviously, any social entrepreneur you talk to is always going to say, I'm going to take the impact first. Of course you would if you could, but sometimes there's a business reality there as well where actually maybe you don't take the impact, but it means that you can continue and actually be successful longer term. There's a great example that in Africa, there's a few social enterprises there have had huge success in taking out sort of mini solar systems out into rural areas in Africa. I mean, some of these companies are now doing 10,000 units a month in Africa. Off-Grid Electric is one, B-Box is another one. There's a couple others as well. These guys, they developed a PayGo system, which is effectively like a mobile money payment system. And when they developed this, I mean, they were like, this is brilliant, because what we can do is we can go out, because at the time they were sort of not reaching the poorest of the poor at that time because they couldn't really afford it. So the beauty of the PayGo is you could set it at a very low dollar amount over a longer period of time. So these companies, one of them was telling me that they saw that as a fantastic opportunity and really pushed out into sort of that sort of bottom 10% of the market where the highest social impact could be achieved. And they had some great success in distributing out there. However, what happened is effectively the issue was that many of these customers actually didn't have the financial capacity or the financial consistency to be able to repay the system. And they had a huge amount of defaults that basically created large issues for those social enterprises moving forward. So there's always a lesson to learn. There's always that balance. I mean, obviously, we want to be able to go out and reach those most in need, but it needs to be done in a way that's also sustainable for the organisation. And quite often, there's never an easy answer to that question.
But that's a very important part of being a social enterprise, to look at that sustainability aspect, I guess. What would you say has been the most challenging part of being a CEO of a social enterprise in Cambodia?
Yeah, there's a few things, probably a few that I won't go into. But there's definitely, I think, realizing how little you know about a culture. I think probably my largest disadvantage was that I wasn't Cambodian, and we were setting up a social enterprise in a country where I didn't have that deep implicit understanding of the culture. So that gives you a significant disadvantage and really emphasizes how much you need to get good people on board as soon as possible, good local people. So, for example, our Cambodian unit now, we have around 30 staff, and effectively it's managed by two fantastic people who are Cambodian, and it's going really well with those guys. But so really realizing how silly and stupid some of your conclusions are because you don't have that cultural context is really a big point that you need to do early on, and realizing that you can't fully understand points ever effectively, and that you just need to go with the flow. The flip side of that is that you're not constrained by those cultural norms as well. So you're able to look at things from an outsider's perspective. So that gives you an advantage, but there's also that significant disadvantage as well.
So the best of both worlds in that way.
I don't know if I'd say best of one world, but definitely the worst of the other as well.
Yes, for sure. And what would you say is your biggest lesson learned, Ben, throughout your journey as a social entrepreneur, and something that our listener can take away and apply to their own cause?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's been a lot of things. I think I'm a big fan of. There's a book called The Lean Startup. It's a book from Silicon Valley written by a guy called Eric Rice. And basically it talks about this process of build, measure, learn that you go through, etc. But really the key of the book is that admitting to yourself that even if you're an absolute expert in that field or wherever you're working, you know very little about how the social enterprise is going to operate, and you know very little about how the customer is going to respond. So what the idea there is admitting that you know very little, but what can you do about that? So the lean startup methodology is, well, the only way you can know is to go out there and test. So it's not about getting this amazing thing together and making sure it goes out there, etc. It's about just getting out there and doing it and seeing what happens. Now, obviously, you need to do that in the right way. You don't want to be going and building a biodigester that's technically not complete, but it's more in the idea of what people are interested in, what are people willing to pay, what are people willing to buy, what makes the difference, etc. So there's a couple of examples that I think would be of interest. One was we were in the early stages of the product development, but we hadn't actually manufactured the product yet, but we wanted to know what was important to people. So what we did is we basically designed up a bit of a kind of like a pitch deck, like this flip chart thing that you can go out and talk to people about. So we designed it up talking about the product and what it would be with some sort of CGI images. And we went out and started selling it to people before we actually had the product. Now, that's quite often a sort of strange thing to do and a petrifying thing to do, particularly when someone says, yes, I want one, because suddenly you don't actually have a product to sell them. But the beauty of it is, particularly with early adopters, and there's a lot of research out on this, is that early adopters are incredibly forgiving. They tend to be high risk takers and are incredibly forgiving and want to be part of that design journey. So we kind of went out there, sold it. We actually had a couple of people say, yes, I want to buy one. We're like, oh, fantastic. And then we're like, what the hell do we do now? Because the product wasn't actually built. But we got some great feedback through. So then we talked to them about it, where we're at, and then we'll be able to send it to them soon. We basically gave them the sort of the gold star customer service, got them involved in the process, and they were really happy in the end. It was a bit of a crazy time, but it really gave us great information through there as well. So that's a key point. The other one I'd mention is, particularly in social enterprise, is what you think is important as far as the impact you're achieving. Your customers may not give two hoots about, and they may be way more interested in something else. So for us, we're obviously interested in reducing health issues, increasing farming, sustainability, improving sanitation, etc. But what the farmers are really interested in is modernising their kitchen, having a rice cooker, being able to show off their nice new kitchen to their neighbours, making their farming easier by having an organic fertiliser that's there and ready to go. So you really got to differentiate those things out and let go of your own conceptions.
I think I'm smiling as you're talking, Ben, because I teach health promotion at university. And one of the things that we were talking with our student this week was, they will graduate and thinking they're expert in health. So it's very tempting to go to a community and come up with all the answer, But the idea is that, if you want to solve a health problem, you will be focused on that health problem to solve. But for them, their priority might be completely different. So you really do have to listen and work with the local people. And that's kind of what I'm hearing from your experience as well, in another area, really about working with the people and listening to their needs,
Yeah, exactly. There was a hilarious thing that not hilarious in a bad way, but it was just a beautiful example of this. I went along to this presentation workshop where an organization in Cambodia that was doing clean cooking had contracted in this marketing company in Phnom Penh to do this campaign around sort of selling these clean cook stoves. And the remit was cooking with wood gives all these bad health effects. So we want to do a marketing campaign around this. So this marketing came in. They were very, like zhuzhi and doing this amazing stuff. And they had a picture of a traditional fire and they'd turned the fire into a snake image and all this stuff. And they went out there and pushed it. And they had all these local agents and maybe sort of 20, 30 local agents who went out there with this campaign. And it was an absolute disaster. It's just like no one was wanting to buy these cook stoves with the campaign that we're using, except for one woman. One woman basically sold like 90% of the cook stoves out of the whole sort of pilot period. So I was in this and I was like, well, what was the reason? What did she say why people bought it? And basically the reason was that she pretty much just gave up on the campaign. She tried it a couple of times and it wasn't working. But she knew how much time and money people spent collecting wood. So she just went up to people and said, oh, well, how much time are you spending collecting wood or how much you're spending? Great. All right. Well, it's basically costing you this each year. Buy one of these and it'll save you time and money. And they're like, okay, great. And that's why they bought it.
Really cool story. And before you were the CEO of ATEC, Ben, you were the National Development Manager of the School of Social Entrepreneurs for several years. So I can imagine that this puts you in a very kind of advantageous position in terms of understanding the ins and outs of social enterprise before you get started with your own. So my question to you, Ben, is what tips do you have for any other aspiring social entrepreneur that are considering, building a business with purpose?
Yeah, I think there's. I was very, very lucky, and have been not by design, but it's happened. I sort of worked in the corporate sector, then went and worked for Oxfam for a few years and saw the NGO side, and then had the experience to go and do the social enterprise stuff. So I've been very lucky in that way. The key thing I probably saw around 300 startup social enterprises over, I think it was about 2.5 years at the School for Social Entrepreneurs. And the key thing I saw over that time was the market was changing a lot. And one of the key things moving forward is if you're sort of starting out as a social enterprise, whatever issue or whatever you're looking to do, I'd say 99% of the time someone else is also working on that or has worked on that. So what I really recommend people doing now is if you see a particular area that you want to work in or whatever, go and find someone who's already done it and figure out some type of arrangement or agreement, or go work for them first of all, if you can. If you can't, find out some type of arrangement or agreement where you can basically copy what they're doing or have access to what they're doing. And most social entrepreneurs are pretty open. We don't tend to be very protective as such. So, and don't start from scratch. Start from a level where someone's made all those mistakes that you've made, that you're about to make, and you'll have a lot more success than sort of really trying to start from scratch.
I love it. And I think that's something I've learned as a fundraiser in 10 years of fundraising. There's no unique ideas anymore. So don't try and come up with the great new idea. Just look at how you can learn from others and adapt it to your business or your cause, because that's how you are ultimately successul.
And even if you do have a unique idea, I mean, to understand the actual execution of an idea, I think that's the key.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you may have something unique and groundbreaking, which is fantastic. But the 9 out of 10 problems that you will encounter that will put your social enterprise under are general business things. It's not actually to do with the technology. It's your balance sheet, it's your cash flow, it's your people management or whatever. So go and learn from those who have done it well.
Love it. So we are coming to the end of the interview, and for our final questions, we like to do a bit of a lightning round. So your answers don't have to be necessarily to do with ATEC. They can be whatever is the first thing that comes to mind. So with that in mind, with that in mind, what are you most excited about today?
Today, probably, I'm actually heading to New York next week, which is very exciting. Never been to New York. There's a UN conference on technology for the Sustainable Development Goals. So we've been invited to go present at that. So that's exciting.
That is very exciting.
What was the one thing holding you back from taking the helm at ATEC?
Balancing work and family. I have 3 small kids and a wonderful wife. If you talk to anyone who's running a social enterprise that sort of got past that startup phase, you'll find this is a common comment.
Yes, we literally just finished an interview with our guests who had 3 kids as well. And so what do you see as being ATEC's biggest challenge for the next 12 months?
2 probably. Number 1 is getting the Cambodian operation to break even next year. Number 2 is we want to expand to 5 countries and about 1 million systems by 2030. So I got to go hit the footpath and convince people to come on that journey with us.
You've mentioned that your advice to social entrepreneur would be don't start from scratch. But what is the best advice that you have ever received, Ben?
It kind of went back to what I said before, is admitting what you don't know and then figuring out a way to test it. So the beauty, there's a scientific process called A/B testing. So basically it's you have a control and then you have one where you test a variable. If you don't know the answer, fantastic. You're asking the right question, then go and do a A/B test.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is sadly time to wrap up. If you could leave us with a few words that our listeners would really take to heart today, what would they be?
Another good bit of advice I got was that business is in essence, a business is a collection of people, and you're only ever as successful as the people you can bring in. So really focus on getting the right people around you, be it staff, be it managers, co-founders, mentors, investors, partners, whatever it may be.
And so just to do a bit of a shout out, what's the best way to reach out to you and learn more about ATEC?
Yeah, our main platform is Facebook. It's hugely popular in Cambodia. So we put a lot of info on there. So that's facebook.com/ATEC Bio. So you can message us through there. Email's also good, info@atecbio.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Human Factor podcast, Ben.
Cool. Thank you very much for having me.
The goodie bag. So, Mel, what are you putting in the goodie bag?
So I'm putting into the goodie bag a new Instagram account that I came across. I mean, the account isn't new, but it's called at the.vulva.gallery. And the account has actually 182,000 followers. So it's quite a big account. But basically what it is, it's using art as a way to demystify the vulva. And so basically as you go onto the account, you just see kind of different painting or kind of, graphical representation of different type of vulva. And the idea with that is, to remove the stigma attached to some differences. And I really like that because I never realized that some women were self-conscious about that. So when I came across that, I thought, that's a really nice way to kind of spark the conversation and make women more confident about their body. And I'm really passionate about women's health and sexual health. So that really kind of resonated with me. And so you can go and check it out on Instagram, but also you can go to the shop, and it's called thevulvagallery.com/shop. And there's everything from sticker and print and cards and tote bags and everything. And some of the design are actually very cute.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really different. And I think that's why it's working really well on Instagram. So yeah, that's my goodie bag for this month.
Awesome. So I am putting in an app called BorrowBox, a completely different direction than the Volva Gallery, but I'm putting in this app called BorrowBox, which is basically a library for audiobooks. So we all know Audible, the great app to buy audiobooks. However, this one basically operates exactly like a library, except it's attached to your library card, in fact, except that you borrow audiobooks and they directly download straight onto your phone. And then once your borrowing time is up, it's deleted off your phone, or once you finish, of course. And I just love it because I commute a lot, which means I'm constantly in the car and I don't get a chance to read as much as I'd like. And so this allows me to read while I am driving, and also curbs a little bit of my addiction to buying physical books. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please hit subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We would suggest 5 stars. Or you can head over to our page, The Human Factor Podcast, on Instagram or Facebook and join in the conversation. Tell us what you thought of this episode, and if you have thoughts or insights to add to anything Ben said today, leave us a comment.
Or you can tweet us at _Human Factor, or visit the website humanfactor.com.au and say hello. This show is just one part of the community that really wants to affect and grow social change. So if you have a topic or a person that you'd like us to feature on the show, please let us know.
You're all awesome, and we'll see you next time.